Alright guys, let's do a deeper dive into the Pfizer building in Manhattan. And we're also gonna figure out what most probably the engineer did wrong. For the people who didn't see my previous video, here we see the Pfizer building. So this picture in the middle is the situation before the renovation. We see here an empty corner, and here on the right side is the current state. I count here 16 floors on top of this existing floor. Existing part of the building, and here are 4 floors that are completely new over the whole building. If we zoom in a little closer, we see here one buckled column, and on this side also one buckled column, buckled towards each other, where we see also that multiple floors have sagged. I did some investigation of the measurement of the building. Just here in Google Maps, you can see the whole length of the building divided by the amount of windows. And like this, I figured out that 2 windows and a frame are more or less 9.2 feet. So with this info, I could optimize the model. So here we see the model with the red shade. This is the new part, and here the 3 floors at the bottom are existing floors. I also figured out the measurements of these columns here. I found this video on Reddit where we can see better the proportions of the buckled columns. So here is the column, and this is the reinforcement at the moment. And here we can see better proportions of the column. What we can see is that the short side is more or less the half of the long side. And this reinforcement, the support, for example, is ½ foot, which makes then the column 3 times as big, so 1.5 foot. Here I put some information together. Here we also see the head of a worker right next to the column, and the head of a worker is more or less the same as the short side of the column. Also, the thickness here of this flange is not thicker than 1 inch. With all this information, it's supposed to be a W1667 profile. So I added this profile also in the model. So these columns here at the bottom, they're all the W1667 profile. And this one and this one are the buckled columns in the model. They are not buckled, of course. So these profiles, these columns here are now W1667 profiled, as mentioned before. We're going to run a steel check now, only with the self-weight of the building. So only the structure that we see now is added in the calculation. And here we see that the columns are already in a red color, which means that they didn't pass the check. We have a unity check of 1.39 at this moment. And the unity check actually shows the maximum capacity of a profile. In this case, it exceeds maximum capacity of the profile with almost 40%. Professor once told me that these are actually theoretical numbers. If you exceed something with 40%, it wouldn't cause directly a collapse. But if you have a unity check of around 3, collapse or an accident might happen. So now we add people, furniture, these kind of things, and we also add some extra safety according to the standards. The unity check goes up to 2.99. This would come already really close to an accident. One thing that's not added yet in this model is the curtain wall. So if I press refresh now, then we have the complete model, everything included. And we see that its unity check becomes 3.29. So really a number that can cause accidents. And of course, we also saw that in the Pfizer building now. So now, why didn't the engineer see this as a problem, or why didn't he see this? First, I have to tell that there's also a chance that they didn't check this part and just thought that it was fine in another building and said, okay, we can also add it on top of this one. That could have been their statement that everybody accepted so far. I would like to add to the story that I know how much pressure engineers have, because, for example, developers, they really have their deadline, they have their budget. Quotations are already accepted and results are expected as well. So what he could have done wrong, I see 3 mistakes that he could have made. 2 of them with less impact and one with big impact. I will start with a smaller one. So if we go back to that video, this video, once again, we see that there is fireproofing around the profile. So for the engineer at that moment, it was impossible to see in real life the measurements of the column. So they made an assumption, and maybe in this assumption they took a bigger profile, like slightly bigger profiles in the model. You would see that the unity check would drop, but not drastically, but it would drop. Let's say it goes down to 2.5 or maybe to 2. Another point with some impact, but not that much, is that all the columns also have data behind. So the stronger the connection, the less likely it is to buckle. I will show you that in this video quickly. We just take a piece of the model and we use it here for this setup as a test model. So this can be data in the model. So the left one called the normal connection, and these are 2 columns with beams in between, but with a stronger connection. Here on the left side, you see really if I would add one more, it would break. And here we see that the one on the right collapses after placing 12 bricks because of that stronger connection. Imagine that he put the stronger connections in the model instead of the normal ones. He actually gave the columns more capacity than they actually had. But we're still not there yet. So we see, and we saw already, that the column is surrounded by concrete. In 1960, we still use concrete. Also, something interesting to add is that I heard multiple stories that the rust here decreased the strength of the column, but this is really nonsense. I have here some pictures of rusty beams, and if you look at this picture, for example, there you see that the rust, the corrosion has impact on the thickness of the steel. Because we were talking about the fireproofing. If the engineer would have combined 2 material as one structural part, the profile would have had much more strength. But we see that the column, the steel column and the concrete didn't work together. So if the steel column would have been filled with these shear studs, then the steel and the concrete would have worked as one. So back to the model, where we gonna change these columns into the same steel column, but now surrounded by concrete. The yellow part is concrete. So add it to the model. And here we see what that does. It has a huge impact on the columns. So now it complies according to standards without changing the data of the connections or making the flanges of the steel thicker. So if I would add these 2 steps as well, it would lower the unity check even a bit more. But like I said before, this has the biggest impact. So my expectation is that the engineer calculated the column that buckled as a concrete plus steel structural element. But because the shear studs were not installed, the steel had to do it on his own, and that's why it went wrong. I hope you liked the video, and I see you in the next one.